She was twice my age, lived next door, and one rainy night, her touch ignited a fire I couldn't extinguish. But what if everyone finds out? I'm not talking about a harmless crush or a fleeting glance over the fence. No, this was something deeper, something dangerous, something that could unravel everything I'd built in my quiet little life. Her name was Eleanor, 48, with eyes that held stories I'd never read and a laugh that made my knees weak. Those eyes were a deep hazel, flecked with gold, like autumn leaves caught in sunlight, and they seemed to see right through me, uncovering secrets I didn't even know I had. Her laugh wasn't loud or forced, it was soft, melodic, the kind that lingers in your mind long after it's gone, making you crave to hear it again. I was 24, stuck in a dead-end job, living with my overbearing parents in their cookie-cutter suburban house. The house was one of those identical boxes in a row, white siding, manicured lawn, the American dream turned into a trap. My room was still the same as when I was a teenager, posters fading on the walls, a reminder of how little I'd moved forward. Eleanor's place was right next door, close enough to smell her lavender garden wafting over on breezy afternoons, close enough to hear her soft jazz through open windows on quiet evenings, close enough to feel her presence like a magnetic pull I couldn't ignore or explain away. It was as if her energy seeped through the shared fence, drawing me in without a word. It started innocently, a wave as I took out the trash, a smile when our eyes met over the mailbox, a casual chat about the weather while she pruned her roses. Those chats were brief at first, polite exchanges that left me feeling oddly alive, like I'd been sleepwalking through my days until then. But then came that night, the storm, the blackout, the moment she invited me in for a glass of wine to wait it out. The rain pounded like drums on the roof, thunder rumbling in the distance, and the power cut plunged the street into darkness, save for the occasional flash of lightning. One blast turned into two, then three, the wine rich and velvety, warming us from the inside as the conversation flowed deeper. And suddenly her hand was on mine, her voice low and husky, her gaze piercing through the dim candlelight we'd lit. I knew it was wrong from the very start. She was older, wiser, married once and now single after what must have been a painful split, carrying the weight of experiences I could only imagine. And I was, me. Just a kid to the world, barely out of college, fumbling through adulthood, but to her? To her, I was something else entirely, perhaps a spark of youth she craved, or maybe just a distraction from her own loneliness. The thrill of it, the secrecy, the forbidden rush that made my pulse race every time our eyes met, it consumed me like a wildfire spreading through dry grass. But every stolen glance across the yard, every whispered word when no one was looking, came with a price that grew heavier by the day. My parents were nosy, always peeking out windows and asking about my comings and goings. The neighbors were gossips, trading stories over morning coffee like it was currency. And Eleanor? She had secrets of her own, layers I was only beginning to peel back, hints of a past that made her both alluring and terrifying. What happens when you cross a line you can't uncross? When the person you're falling for could destroy everything you know, your family ties, your reputation in this tight-knit community, even your sense of self? Stick around, because this story isn't just about passion that burns hot and fast, it's about the guilt that eats at you in the quiet hours, the fear that shadows every step, and the moment it all came crashing down in ways I never saw coming. Let me take you back to last summer, when the air was thick with heat and possibility, the kind of humid warmth that clings to your skin and makes everything feel charged with potential. My name's Alex, and I was 24, still living in my parents' house in a sleepy suburban neighborhood in Ohio, where the streets wound in lazy circles and everyone knew everyone's business. It wasn't where I wanted to be, trust me. I had dreams of escaping to a bustling city like Chicago or New York, chasing a life bigger than mowing lawns on weekends and dodging my mom's endless lectures about getting serious with my future. She'd corner me in the kitchen, hands on hips, going on about how I needed a real career, not this limbo I was in. But rent was impossible on my meager salary, and my job at the local hardware store, stocking shelves with nails and paint cans, dealing with grumpy customers who treated me like I was invisible, barely covered my phone bill and the occasional night out with friends I rarely saw anymore. So, there I was, stuck in that familiar rut, restless and itching for something, anything, to shake me out of my monotonous routine that felt like Groundhog Day on repeat. Next door lived Eleanor. She'd moved in a year ago, after her divorce, or so the neighborhood whispers said. You know how those rumors fly in places like this, half-truths passed around like hot potatoes at block parties. She was 48, but you wouldn't know it from the way she carried herself, confident and graceful, with this quiet intensity that made you want to know her story, to unravel the mysteries behind her poised exterior. There was something timeless about her, like she belonged in a black and white film, elegant and enigmatic. Her house was the only one on the block with real character, ivy climbing the walls and wild tendrils, a porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze like it was whispering secrets, and those lavender plants that scented the air with a soothing, herbal aroma that always calmed my frayed nerves. I'd see her sometimes, out there in the early morning light, watering her garden with a hose that glistened in the sun, or in the evenings, reading on her porch with a book in hand, her auburn hair catching the fading sunlight and turning it into shades of copper and red. She'd wave when she caught me looking, and I'd wave back, feeling this stupid flutter in my chest, a mix of nervousness and excitement that I couldn't quite place. It was nothing, I told myself repeatedly. Just a neighbor being neighborly, a polite acknowledgement in this small world we shared. But then we started talking, and it shifted everything subtly at first. It was small conversations. She'd ask about my day while I mowed the lawn, the hum of the mower drowning out my awkward replies, or I'd compliment her flowers, stumbling over words as I admired the vibrant blooms she tended with such care. She had this way of listening, really listening, tilting her head slightly, her eyes focused solely on me, like every word I said mattered in a world where I often felt unheard. It was intoxicating, that attention, a stark contrast to the distracted nods I got from others. My parents, on the other hand, were the opposite in every way. Mom was always on my case about finding direction, her voice laced with disappointment that made me shrink inside, and Dad just grunted from behind his newspaper in the living room, buried in sports scores and oblivious to my inner turmoil. They didn't get me, not like Eleanor did. She seemed to understand the restlessness bubbling under my surface without me having to explain it. She'd tell me stories about her travels, Paris in the spring with its blooming cherry blossoms and sidewalk cafes, Rome's ancient ruins under a golden sunset, places I'd only seen in movies or dreamed about while scrolling on my phone late at night, and I'd hang on every word, imagining a life beyond the cul-de-sac, a world full of adventure that she'd lived and I yearned for. One evening, as the sky darkened with gathering clouds, a storm rolled in unexpectedly, the kind that shakes the windows with gusts of wind and kills the power in an instant, leaving you in eerie silence broken only by rain. I was alone that night, my parents at some church event they dragged themselves to every week, when I saw Eleanor's porch light flicker out amid the downpour. Then came a knock at the door, sharp and insistent over the thunder. There she was, soaked from the rain that plastered her shirt to her skin, holding a flashlight in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other, her hair dripping and her smile apologetic yet inviting. "Power's out," she said, her voice warm and teasing, cutting through the storm's roar like a lifeline. "Care to keep me company till it's back on? I hate sitting in the dark alone." My heart raced, a wild thump in my chest that I tried to ignore. I should have said no, made up an excuse about being tired or having work to do. I should have known better than to step into that unknown. But I didn't. The pull was too strong, the curiosity too sharp. I followed her into her dimly lit house, the beam of the flashlight dancing on the walls, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and something else, something forbidden that hung between us like unspoken words, waiting to be said. That night changed everything in ways I couldn't have predicted. We sat on her couch, the cushions soft and worn from years of use, the wine loosening my nerves with each sip, her laughter filling the room like music that drowned out the storm outside. The thunder crashed, lightning illuminating her face in brief flashes, highlighting the lines of experience around her eyes that only made her more beautiful. The storm raged outside, winds howling and rain lashing the windows, but inside, it was just us, two people caught in a moment that felt too big to contain, too intimate for strangers who were barely more than that. She told me about her marriage, how it crumbled under the weight of unmet expectations and growing apart, her voice steady but laced with a sadness that made my chest ache for her. I told her about my dreams, my fears of never amounting to anything, the way I felt trapped in my own life like a bird in a cage, wings clipped. Her hand brushed mine as she poured another glass, the contact sending a jolt through me, and I swear, time stopped right there, the world narrowing to just that touch. Her touch wasn't accidental, it lingered, deliberate, warm against my skin. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt it, the pull, the heat building like a slow fire, the line we were about to cross without a map back. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, her breath mingling with mine, but she didn't pull away, her fingers intertwining with mine instead. Neither did I, the hesitation melted away in the heat of the moment. Our lips met, tentative at first, exploring, then hungry and desperate as if we'd been starving for this. It was like every suppressed desire I'd ever had came rushing to the surface, flooding my senses with her scent, her taste, the softness of her. She was older, experienced in ways that made me feel both exhilarated and out of my depth, and I was. What? A kid with a crush that had spiraled into something real? No, it was more than that. It was real, raw, overwhelming, a connection that transcended the years between us. But even as I lost myself in her, tangled in sheets later that night, a voice in my head screamed, "This is wrong. She's your neighbor, someone you've seen every day in mundane ways. She's twice your age, carrying baggage I could barely comprehend. What if someone finds out?" The thought sent a chill through the warmth. The next morning, I woke up in her bed, the sheets tangled around us, the reality of it crashing over me like a cold wave from the ocean. Guilt gnawed at my stomach, sharp and insistent, mixing with the remnants of last night's wine. My parents were home now, oblivious as they bustled in the kitchen next door, but their house was just a wall away, thin enough that sounds carried if you listened hard. What if they'd seen me sneak out in the early light, disheveled and guilty? What if the neighbors had noticed my absence, or worse, heard something through the storm? Eleanor was calm, too calm, stirring beside me with a sleepy smile, like she'd done this before, like it was just another day. "We'll be careful," she said softly, her fingers tracing my jawline in a way that made me shiver, both from desire and dread. But careful wasn't enough, the stakes were too high in this small world where reputations could shatter like glass. Days turned into weeks, and our secret grew heavier with each passing encounter, a weight I carried in my chest like a stone. We'd meet at night, when the neighborhood slept under a blanket of stars, stolen moments in her backyard where the lavender scented our whispers, or in her car parked down the street, or her living room with the curtains drawn tight against prying eyes. Every touch was electric, sparking fires that burned brighter each time, every whisper a promise that bound us closer. But it came with a cost that eroded me from the inside. I started lying to my parents more frequently, fabricating stories about working late shifts at the store or hanging out with old friends from high school. They didn't suspect anything at first, but their questions got sharper, more probing. "Why are you so distracted, Alex?" Mom would ask over dinner, her eyes narrowing with that maternal intuition that always saw too much. I'd shrug it off with a forced smile, mumbling excuses, but the guilt was suffocating, a constant companion that twisted my guts when I looked them in the eye. Eleanor, though, remained a mystery that both drew me in and kept me at arm's length. She'd pull me close one moment, her arms wrapping around me with a passion that left me breathless, then push me away the next with a distant look in her eyes, like she was wrestling with her own demons that she wouldn't let me near. I learned bits and pieces about her past in fragments, a controlling ex-husband who had stifled her spirit for years, a daughter who barely spoke to her now, living across the country and carrying grudges from the divorce, a life full of regret she hid behind her radiant smile and composed demeanor. "You're too young to understand the complexities," she'd say gently when I probed, but I wanted to know every part of her, even the dark corners that scared me, the scars that made her who she was. Then came the night that changed the game entirely, ratcheting up the tension to unbearable levels. We were in her kitchen, the dim light from a single bulb casting long shadows, laughing over a shared bottle of wine that we'd opened to celebrate nothing in particular, when I heard a car pull into my driveway next door, tires crunching on gravel. My parents were home early from their outing, earlier than expected. I froze, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears, the wine turning sour in my mouth. Eleanor grabbed my hand, her grip firm and urgent, pulling me toward the back door through the pantry, but not before I saw a shadow move past her window, a silhouette that wasn't from the storm or imagination. Someone was watching from outside, lingering in the darkness. Not my parents, someone else, perhaps a neighbor out for a late walk or worse, intentionally spying. The neighborhood was full of busybodies, people with too much time and too little excitement, and gossip spread like wildfire here, leaping from house to house until it consumed everything in its path. If word got out about us, it wouldn't just be awkward small talk at the grocery store, it could ruin us both, her standing in the community, my relationship with my family, the fragile life I'd been holding together. The next day, as I went to check the mail in the bright morning sun, I found a note slipped under my front door, folded neatly but ominously. No signature, just scrawled words in block letters, "I know what you're doing. Stop before it's too late." My blood ran cold, a chill spreading through me despite the warm day. Was it a neighbor like Mrs. Carter, who always seemed to be watching from her curtains? A friend of my dad's who had suspicions. Someone who'd seen us in a moment of carelessness, a light left on or a door ajar? I showed it to Eleanor later that evening, my hands shaking as I handed it over, expecting her to panic or at least show concern. But she just laughed it off lightly, crumpling the paper and tossing it aside. People talk, Alex, it's a small town, she said, but her eyes didn't meet mine fully, a flicker of something, fear? Guilt? Passing through them. I started to wonder, what wasn't she telling me about her life, her past? Was this just a game to her, a temporary escape, while I was investing my whole heart? And why did I feel like I was falling deeper into something I couldn't control, a web that tightened with every step? The note haunted me relentlessly, burrowing into my thoughts like a thorn I couldn't remove. I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were everywhere, peering from behind half-closed blinds in the windows across the street, lurking behind the tall fences that separated our yards, hiding in the shadows of our quiet street as dusk fell. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before, Mrs. Carter across the road lingering too long on her porch with her morning coffee, her gaze drifting toward Eleanor's house more often than coincidence allowed, the way my dad's friend Tom looked at me when he came over for poker night, his eyes narrowing as if he was piecing together a puzzle I didn't want solved. Paranoia crept in slowly at first, then all at once, coloring every interaction with suspicion, but so did an obsession that consumed my waking hours. Eleanor was like a drug, potent and addictive, her presence a high that made colors brighter and sensations sharper. Every moment away from her felt like withdrawal, a dull ache that only she could soothe, but every moment with her pushed us closer to the edge of a cliff, the drop invisible but inevitable. Our nights grew reckless as the summer wore on, the initial caution giving way to a desperate hunger. We'd sneak into her garage under cover of darkness, the cool concrete floor against our backs as the thrill of being caught fueled the fire between us, making every caress more intense. She'd whisper things that made my heart race uncontrollably, promises of more time together, confessions of how I made her feel alive again after years of numbness, things I wasn't sure I believed but wanted to with every fiber of my being. "You're different, Alex," she'd say in those hushed tones, her breath hot against my ear. "You see me, the real me, not just the surface." But did I really? The more I learned about her in those stolen hours, the more questions piled up like unanswered letters. She'd drop hints about her past casually, a scandal in her old town that forced her to move, a falling out with her daughter that left scars deeper than she'd admit, but she'd clam up when I pressed for details, changing the subject with a kiss or a laugh. It made me wonder if I was just a chapter in a story she'd told before, a recurring pattern in her life of seeking youth to fill voids. My life started unraveling thread by thread, the secret pulling at the seams until everything felt loose. Work suffered badly, I'd zone out behind the counter at the hardware store, replaying our nights in vivid detail instead of stocking shelves or helping customers, my boss snapping at me more than once for my absent-mindedness. My parents noticed the changes, of course, how could they not? "What's wrong with you these days?" Mom snapped one night over a tense family dinner, her voice sharp with worry and frustration, fork clattering against her plate. I mumbled something vague about stress from work, avoiding her gaze, but she wasn't buying it, her intuition flaring like a warning light. Dad, usually silent and detached, started watching me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, his grunts turning into pointed questions about where I'd been. I felt like a stranger in my own home, torn between the life I was supposed to live, the dutiful son, the responsible adult, and the one I was stealing with Eleanor in shadows and whispers, a double existence that exhausted me. Then came the second note, delivered in the same anonymous way, this one worse and more personal. "You're not the first. Ask her about David." David? Who the hell was David, and why did the name send a spike of jealousy through me? When I confronted Eleanor that evening, bursting into her house with the paper clutched in my fist, her face went pale, the color draining like water from a sink. "It's nothing," she said too quickly, her voice a notch higher than usual. "Just someone trying to stir trouble, probably a jealous neighbor." But I wasn't stupid, I could see the cracks in her facade. I pushed harder, demanding to know, and for the first time, she snapped back, her eyes flashing with anger. "You're a kid, Alex. You don't get to demand answers from me like this." Her words stung, not just because they were harsh and cutting, but because they rang with a truth I hated. I was in over my head, navigating waters too deep for my experience, and she knew it all too well. I started digging on my own, unable to let it go, late at night when insomnia gripped me. I'd scroll through old neighborhood forums on my laptop, the screens glow the only light in my room, searching for anything about Eleanor, any crumb of her past. After hours of fruitless clicks, I found a thread from her old town, buried deep in a local gossip site that hadn't been updated in years. It mentioned a scandal, an affair with a younger man named David, someone around my age, who'd left town abruptly after it all blew up in public humiliation. The details were vague and salacious, pieced together from anonymous posts, but the comments were brutal and unforgiving. Homewrecker. Predator. She preys on the young and naive. My stomach churned with nausea, a mix of betrayal and fear. Was that what people would say about us if they knew? About me, the fool who fell for it? Or worse, was I just repeating history, another David in her collection of regrets? I should have walked away right then, cut ties and saved what was left of my sanity, but I couldn't. The hold she had on me was too strong, too entwined with my emotions. The next time I saw her, under the guise of a casual visit, I didn't bring up David or the forum. Instead, I kissed her harder than ever, pouring my doubts into the passion, like I could erase them with physical intensity. She responded with a fierceness that scared me, her nails digging into my back, like she was trying to prove something to herself as much as to me. But the notes kept coming relentlessly, a third slipped into my mailbox, then a fourth under the wiper of my car, each one more threatening and intimate. End it, or I will. You're playing with fire, and you'll get burned. I started losing sleep entirely, jumping at every creak in the house during the night, every sidelong glance from a neighbor during the day, my world shrinking to a constant state of alert. Then, one night when the air felt heavier than usual, it all came to a head in a confrontation I couldn't avoid. Eleanor invited me over with a text, her voice urgent when I called to confirm. "We need to talk," she said, the words hanging like a storm cloud. When I got there, slipping through the back door as always, she was pacing the living room floor, a glass of wine trembling in her hand, her usual composure cracked. "I'm leaving," she announced without preamble, her eyes avoiding mine. "Next week. I can't stay here anymore." My world tilted on its axis, everything spinning. Leaving? Why now, after all this? She wouldn't explain fully, just kept repeating it was for the best, her voice strained. I begged her to stay, to tell me the truth about everything, the notes, David, us, but she just shook her head sadly. "You don't understand, Alex. You never will, you're too young for this mess." That's when I saw it, half hidden on her mantle among trinkets and candles, a photo I'd never noticed before in all our time together. Eleanor, looking younger by a decade, smiling brightly with her arm around a man who looked strikingly like me at my age, carefree and adoring. David, I realized with a sinking certainty. The pieces clicked into place with painful clarity, and the betrayal hit like a physical punch to the gut. She wasn't just running from the notes or the gossip, she was running from her past patterns, from repeating mistakes, and from me, the latest in a line of youthful distractions. I stood there, staring at that photo as if it held all the answers, my heart pounding in my chest so hard I thought it might burst. "Who's David?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt, pointing at the frame. Eleanor's face crumpled, the strong woman I knew dissolving into vulnerability, and for the first time, she looked small, fragile, human in her flaws. "He was a mistake," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the blood rushing in my ears. "Like you." The words cut deeper than I thought possible, slicing through the illusions I'd built around us. A mistake? Was that all I was to her, another reckless fling to fill the void left by her failed marriage, her estranged daughter, her lonely nights? I wanted to scream, to demand more answers, to shake her until she explained every detail, but the truth was staring me in the face, undeniable and cruel. She'd done this before, sought out the thrill of youth to escape her realities, and I'd fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker, blinded by my own desires and naivety. The next day, she was gone without a trace. No goodbye call or text, no final note slipped under my door, just an empty house with windows bare and a for sale sign staked in the front yard like a tombstone. The neighbors whispered in hushed tones as they passed, speculating about her sudden departure, a job offer, family issues, anything but the truth. But no one mentioned the notes that had terrorized me. Perhaps they were from her own hand, a way to force an end, or maybe from someone who'd been hurt before. I never found out who sent them, and in the end, it didn't matter. Maybe it was Mrs. Carter with her nosy vigilance, maybe Tom with some grudge, maybe someone else entirely from her past reaching out. What mattered was the hole Eleanor left behind, not just in my heart, where the ache throbbed constantly, but in my sense of who I was, shattered and questioning everything. I'm still here, in my parents' house that feels even smaller now, trying to piece myself back together one day at a time, going through motions at work and avoiding the empty house next door. The guilt lingers like a shadow, reminding me of the lies and deceptions, but so does the longing, a bittersweet pull that makes me wonder if I'd change anything. That's the worst part, even now, knowing what I know about her patterns, her secrets, I'd do it all again in a heartbeat, chasing that forbidden fire. Have you ever crossed an age line for love, risking everything for a taste of the unknown? Comment your wildest story below and let's discuss the highs and lows. What would you do if caught in this age gap trap, tangled in desire and danger? Drop your advice in the comments to keep the conversation going, share your thoughts. And if this story stirred up your own hidden crushes or unspoken yearnings, share it far and wide, tag a friend who needs the thrill of a tale like this. Because sometimes, the things that break us are the very things that make us feel alive in ways we never imagined, even if the pain lingers long after.